Ladies and gentlemen, now our second speaker comes from Singapore, Dr. Azhar Ibrahim. He is lecturer at the Department of Malay Studies, National University of Singapore, and holds both his PhD and Masters from the same institutions. His research interests include sociology of religion, sociology of literature, and the Malay-Indonesian intellectual tradition. He has also conducted postdoctoral at the University of Copenhagen and Stanford University. We are pleased to welcome Dr. Azhar Ibrahim.
Thank you, Saima. Yeah. The room is a little bit cold, actually. Yeah. Cold in the sense, very cold. Yeah. The temperature. Yeah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Yeah. Salam sejahtera. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Foremost to Tun, yeah. Datuk Sri Mir Habib, yeah. Prof. Farouk. Almost 10 years ago, I was given the opportunity to speak about Muhammad Asad, thanks to Prof. Farouk. In the tradition of Malay studies, Muhammad Asad was not part of our reading list. Yeah? Although we admire many Indian intellectuals, Indo-Pakistan intellectuals, but Muhammad Asad was not in our scheme of reading because our Syed Hussein Alatas actually don't quite cover Muhammad Asad. So I was a student of Malay studies until I got this invitation, and I thought, I was like, okay, I've heard this in campus amongst the Da'wah Usrah, reading the works of Muhammad Asad. And I was like, okay, let me try and read it. It was a journey in itself on my own to really understand the life of a convert intellectual, but eventually becomes an insider. That is more important. Right? So we are glad to have another document, the unpublished letters of Muhammad Asad, which is a wonderful materials for us to understand this towering figure. Yeah? So I taught that lecture in Malay. It was a 2-hour lecture, I think. Not to worry, I'm just going to take maybe 15 minutes here. Yeah? The title of my talk is The Message of Asad, Integrity and Devotion for the Scholarship of Islam. Yeah? I shall begin with the quotation from him. He says, all my interests became since then, upon his conversion, centered around the problem of Islam regeneration. But along the way, he was criticizing also the opposite, the degeneration, which is, I think, a very powerful thing. Thinkers is not only just talking about ideals, but also diagnostically thinking what went wrong in our society. This collection of letters inscribed the integrity and devotion of a man. Asad was a learned, of course, religiously devoted. He had this illustrious career. It tells a story of a thinker who speaks his mind even when it may not be popular, and the need to stand firm with one's principles. This collection of letters can be insights to one's personal experiences, selected memories, and claims and justifications. It is both biographical and historical. In fact, Asad's letters is part of his personal biography, a life of a modern-day Muslim scholar who is a convert. Asad's letters are interesting in two ways. It tells his commitment to friendship, many personal anecdotes we can find from this letter, and the hope through some context of eminent person, he could correct some misconception about him and his family. When he left Pakistan and married Paula Hamida, there are many thoughts circulating that he returned to his old Jewish religion. Yeah? And that they claim that Hamida too was also Jewish in origin. But that was not the case. Hamidah was a Polish and also a Roman Catholic who converted, in fact, even before wanting to get married to Assad. Yeah. Secondly, from this letter, it brings insights to Assad's life and his devotion for scholarship of Islam, meaning that he was busied about translating the Quran, compiling the Hadith, and many other publications that he wanted to present to the English-speaking world. Pakistan was the right place, actually, because it was the powerhouse of a Muslim reformistic thought in the Indo-Pakistan region. So if you know, Islamic Research Center of Pakistan, that hails Fazlur Rahman among others. Yeah? So Assad was around in that era. The letters tell about his attempt to defend himself against those slander and misconception. Now, let me just go very quickly about his main message. There's 3 dimensions. The reformistic outlook. He believes strongly on the importance of intellectual and spiritual regeneration of Muslim thoughts and lives. He enumerated the constituents of reform. What reform entails. It's not just about using akal or ijtihad. He presented what we call a methodology of interpretations. Second, while he advocated for reform, there is also the need to take up critical diagnosis of what I've said earlier, what went wrong. And I think was very frank about it, right? There was no apologia, although people sometimes think that he was an outsider. Third, his moral and intellectual courage to speak up when even it is not popular. The last period of his life, he was thinking about what is exactly about the existence of Islamic State. He was questioning that, right? And of course, many were disappointed too who had followed him, like we say the Islamists who had followed him, but he questioned the very idea of that Islamic State. Assad, in his conversion to Islam, he became Muslim not through like a lens of a mu'alaf, who then thinking that they are far better than other Muslims, but he wanted to really understand Islam in a way like born Muslims wanted to do the same. He might be linked to figures like Sayyid Qutb, Hassan al-Banna, Abdullah Maududi, but he didn't put the da'wah hat. That's very interesting. He put a scholarship hat to that. Yeah? And this is, I think, along the way in our discourse of contemporary Muslim thought, we miss that point. That scholarship hat seems to be delegated, and we give prominence to the da'wah hat. Da'wah means to make Muslim better Muslims. Yeah? All right, so he says this, yeah? Let me just quote, that the intellectual and social dimension of Islam that actually attracted him. Not so much about that magical or millenarian or the obscurantist dimension of a particular belief system. He says this, Islam gave a tremendous incentive to cultural achievement, which constitute one of the proudest pages in the history of mankind. And it gave the incentive by saying yes to the intellect and no to obscurantism, yet to action and no to quietism, yes to life and no to asceticism. Of course, there are some Sufi group was not happy about this position, of course. Yeah? And this is what intellectual engagement is all about. So we have a thinker who wants to say, let's open the debate. And I think he has allowed for that. Yeah? All right, so the other one is maybe I want to highlight about, he was in the very middle of history making. Yeah? The setting up of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, he was, as mentioned, the first citizen of the Republic. He traveled, he met people, but most importantly, along the way, he was a very observant critic. He compiled, and that becomes part and parcel of his scholarship. Yeah? And the call for reform was very much in his heart, the regenerations of the Ummah. Yeah? The other one, which of course Prof. Farouk invoked earlier, there's always an invocation of Muhammad Abdu's ijtihad. And he says this: we claim that Islam is a religion of reason, which in fact it is, and nonetheless we meekly agree to and sometimes even welcome suppression of reason by anyone who just happened to be in power. For most of our ulama, who telling us that in matters of religion independent thought of heresy and that only he can be a true Muslim who blindly repeats the formulas evolved in the olden days and so on and so forth. I think this statement is very courageous. I think in this region, I would say only Tun Mahathir says this kind of statement. Yeah, on the ulama. One, that he encountered and engaged Islam via knowledge. Right? This is very powerful. Yeah? That there can be no doubt, according to him, that the historical experience to us, without any merit on our part, very much wider than that which was available to the companions 13 years ago. So he was elaborating, as centuries move on, knowledge production expanded, and Muslim nations need to embrace new knowledge and technology. So he was trying to appeal for not just ijtihad, but openness to the new knowledge production. But at the same time, he was very critical of the Western civilization too. So there is this dialectical way in which he was engaging. I would say that along the way, and then there's so much talk about Assad, but Assad's critical stand was rather silent, especially when his critique on the religious elite. So I will not say much about this because I want to go back later, in that sense. Because Assad wrote a number of essays on this topic, which is, I think, quite important for us to reflect upon it. It's not about demonizing religious elite, but going to say what went wrong in terms of the projection of ideology, utopia, and so on and so forth. Assad was not stuck with historical romanticism. Like some, unfortunately, in psychology, we call it the convert mentality. There was this sense that the past was glorious and the present are all bad. Assad did not move in that direction, and that's very powerful too. He commented many things, among others that fatwa might have been biased against women, and that local custom give more premium to the, that component of local custom rather than the virtues of Sharia. And most importantly, and I was surprised of this point, he even noted the neglect to take ample concern on the plight of the poor. Coming from a comfortable social position, he took this stand. And he says this: the exploitation of the poor, he noted, is hardly deemed as un-Islamic. And he criticized such stance. He says this: they did do nothing of the kind, referring to a certain interpreters or guardians of Islam. They rarely do anything of any kind beyond abusing those who disagree with some of their views. They entrench themselves not in the true postulates of Islam, but in the barren formalities and conventions of our decadence. And they fight bitterly against any departure from custom simply because it's a departure from custom. And he keep on saying this: and did they ever denounce as un-Islamic the exploitation of the poor by the rich? Did they ever remember the Prophet saying, "He is not a faithful who eats his fill while his neighbor remains hungry"? Remind us of Surah Al-Ma'ud. No, they find it convenient not to remember this, and so on and so forth. You can read it as we took on these letters, and then we move on to the scholarship of Assad. We will uncover many important gems in his historical and his sociological analysis. My last point, Because of his critical stance, yeah, he make a good commentaries on the facets of anti-intellectualism amongst Muslim middle class and especially amongst those who are in power. Anti-intellectualism means you will not respect higher standard, yeah, on the excellence of Muslim scholarship. And this is what his main complaint. Yeah. And Assad, I think most importantly for us to remember, Assad was never a pamphleteer. Right? Today we see a lot of pamphleteer. 2-page talking about Islam, suddenly they can solve the entire civilizational problems. Yeah? Assad studied many years, yeah? Doing compilation of hadiths, interpretation of the Quran, and of course his appreciation of the Islamic turaf combined with modern knowledge. That is not pamphleteering. That is hard work, that is scholarship of engagement. A scholarship of engagement is a college of emancipation. And we shall quote the last point from him. A revival of Islam can never come about with our blindly relying on the thought processes of past generation. We need new methodology, we need new vision, right? Of course, we retain the very essence of Islam. It can come about only with a revival of intellectual honesty. The reverse is anti-intellectualism. Of that spirit of inquiry and criticism, which, having once found in Islam a standard by which to measure truth, is never again contented with chewing the cud of intermediate convention. On that note, sekian terima kasih. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.